स्टार्ट कर दिए क्या?
सेक्शन नंबर
9 ने 10? 11 sure? তুমি 9তে আছা? হা? এনেই তুমি গালি খালা ন ৰাতিপুৱাই ৰাতিপুৱাই? তাতকে জাষ্ট ফৰগেট। No confusion, nothing. Okay, so I think we can start the class, no? Last class we were talking about the concept of stele, and what we remember, if we talk about a stele, what exactly a stele is? What happened early morning? Okay, stele ki hoy? The whole central mass of vascular tissues with or without pith, that is what is called as stele, no? Pith thakibo pare, na thakibo pare. Next question is, who has given the concept of stele? The name of the scientist? Ventiage Maru Dolliot. Third question, what is the boundary of the stele, or who forms the boundary of the stele? It is the endodermis that forms the boundary of the stele. Is endodermis a part of the stellar structure? No, it's not a part of the stellar structure. Instead, they are of opinion that endodermis is a part of the cortex. Next, we have talked about something called as intrastellar or extrastellar tissues, right? It is the terms discussed koriso, and then we have started with types of stele, right? The primitive type of stele was called as Protostele. What we remember from the discussion that we have done is, if you talk about Protostele, the central portion is occupied by a solid cylinder of xylem, and that is surrounded by the phloem. So that is one of the most primitive stele, and what we understand in the primitive type of stele, pith was never seen, right? Gradually in the process of evolution, the pith started developing, right? So we will talk about the types of Protostele today. I think you all have already written the heading in the last class. So types of Protostele boli likha. So we have the first type, so we have the central portion, that is xylem, phloem, Just see whether you have understood or not. মই লিখি লওঁ প্ৰথমতে Just write it down. So we are discussing about Protostele, that is the most primitive stele. The first point about Protostele is it is also called as a solid stele because the peat is absent. If the peat is not present in the center, then what exactly can we find in the center is a solid mass of xylem, right. During the course of evolution, what we have seen is the central xylem getting divided into fragments, right, and accordingly we have the different types of Protostele. If you talk about the first one, that is Heplostilly, in Heplostilly what we have seen, the normal discussion that we have done, center post is occupied by a cylinder of xylem and this cylinder of xylem appears circular. Gradually if you notice in the diagram, the circular structure has kept on changing, no, change etu ki hol, it became a star shape. For a circular substance to become a star shape, ki hobo lagibo, hangibo lagibo nalag, it has to break down, right. So the xylem occupied more space and then what happened is it started breaking down. Next it further broke down and here it more broke, it further or farthest breaking down. Yate ki hobo, yate to ami at least we have seen the plates. In the next diagram, I don't think it's very important to draw, but I think we have an idea. So diagram to kenuka hobo, akibo nalage. So ki hobo, suppose we are talking about this as phloem, something like this, right. Karon plate type he bostutu jodi aru bhangi jay, it will become small fragments of xylem trachite. So this is the type of evolution. So ultimately if peat needs to develop, tetihole centermost portion to ki hobo lagibo, khali hoi jabo lagibo. So ultimately this is the process that the xylem undergoes, right, and accordingly we have the different types of Protostele. After Protostele, the next type of stellar structure is this over, likhi loa tar pisot number 2 likhim. Yate kiba confusion ase niki? Evolution, stellar evolution, or what is the first step that we have seen? Peat was absent, gradually xylem broke into pieces, right. I think this part is over. Next likha, etu hol tedi number 2. Xylem. A basic difference between Protostele and Siphonostele: peat absent, peat present. Next লিখা ectofluic siphonostele. Okay, first is Protostele, peat absent. Next is Siphonocoele. The main point is centermost portion would be occupied by the peat. If the centermost portion is occupied by the peat, does that mean xylem and phloem would be absent? No, obviously in a plant xylem and phloem should be present, right? So centermost portion of the peat as a xylem ki hoy. So xylem could be either on one side of the phloem or it could be on both sides of the phloem. If it is just on the outer side of a phloem, that is called as ectophloic. If xylem is present on both the sides, right? Xylem ase, xylem bhitor pineo phloem cover korise, bahir pineo phloem cover korise. That type would be called as a amphiploic. That is the basic difference, right? And as the name suggests, amphi mane ki both, please say. Duta endodermis, duta pericycle thakibo karon pithot adjust ekdom next to the peat xylem present hobo nware. There should be layers of tissues, and so that layer is called as this one, inner endodermis and inner pericycle, because we know if you are talking about phloem, the boundary ki hobo lagibo, boundary to pericycle hoboi lagibo, no? So yate jodi p thaki pela yate phloem we cannot draw like that, right? So we have layers of tissues that will be called as inner endodermis. Next we have inner pericycle. Pericycle or boundary ki ase, phloem ase. আঁকি লোৱা বস্তুটো if this is over, number 3 লিখিবা Solenostele. Is this over? It all? If this is confusing, তেতিয়াহ'লে এটা কাম কৰাচোন, এইটো B বুলি লিখা, ectoploic A আৰু amphiploic B. You might be thinking that after amphiploic আকৌ second কেনেকৈ আহিলে, কি third কেনেকৈ আহিলে. This is a different type of stele, right? First was Protostele, then is Siphonocoele, and next we have Solenostele. This is not a part of Siphonocoele. ঠিক আছে, so এইকাৰণে ectoploic Siphonocoele টো A বুলি লিখা আৰু amphiploic টো B বুলি লিখা, তেতিয়াহ'লে confusion নহয়. Okay, the next type of a stele is called as Solenostele. What is Solenostele? It is আঁকি লোৱা মই বুজাই দিম What is a solenocele? It is a siphonocele. If it is a siphonocele, we know the diagram. কি আছে মাজত পিঠ আছে xylem surrounded by the phloem. Hey গোটেই structure-টোত এটা যদি break আছে, just one break, that is what is called as the leaf gap. Then if there is one break, this type of a stele is called as solenocele. Again, solenocele could both be ectofloic solenocele and amphifloic solenocele. But here what we are drawing is ectofloic and amphifloic. Ectofloic. A diagram to jodi eta break di dia. This will be amphifloic, siphonocele, ne solenocele. Solenocele. Mane eta break jodi thake, that type of a cele would be called as ki. It will be called as a solenocele. Now, what is a leaf gap? We are talking about the stellar structure in case of a stem, and we know whenever we talk about a stem eta ki hoy the leaves bilako develop kore, right? Normally first stem to enike thakile, so if you take the TS of this one, you are going to see structures like this, you are going to see all the tissues, you are going to see the stele also, but gradually we know ki hoy a leafor pora a stemor pora to leaf to develop koribo nokore prothom dinai to develop nokore. You have a stem, and then from the stem what you will see is you will see the leaves developing. And if you talk about the leaves bilak jetia develop kore no, in the stem there develops a gap, and that is what is called as the leaf gap. That is the area from where the leaf will develop in the stem, right? So if suppose enekwa eta stem ase yate eta gap ase, gap to pra ki develop korise leaf to. Now if you cut a TS of this portion, won't you see a gap? Yes or no? You are talking about a stem like this, and you are talking about a stem in which the leaf is developed. So if you cut a TS of this part, you are going to see something that's completely circular without any gap. But if you are going to cut a TS of this part, you will see a gap. So this gap is called as ki leaf gap. First point, leaf gap ki hoy the portion from where the leaf arises in the stem. Second point that you have to remember is, since we are talking about the development of vascular bundles, right, the stem will have its own xylem and phloem, the leaf will have its own xylem and phloem, right? Jetia eta leaf develop kore, tetia what happens, the stemor jito xylem and phloem, it breaks off, right, just to make new arrangement. So xylem and phloem khini break koribo. In the meantime, leafor jito xylem and phloem, he bostu to ahi pele stemor xylem and phloem lokot join lagibo nalage. Are you understanding? Because that needs to be a continuous structure, no? Xylem and phloem needs to be continuous. It cannot be like this, that from the roots they are taking the substances only to the stem, in a different part they are taking the substances to the leaf in a different part. No, it is a continuous process. But what happens is, during the development of the leaf, at the first time, there develops a break in the main stele in case of a stem. Later, the stellar structure of the leaf and the stem joins together, and this is what is called as the joining link is called as leaf trace, right? So what is a solenocele? A solenocele is a siphonocele with one leaf gap. If a solenocele has many leaf gaps, then it will be called as something else. A solenocele can have one leaf gap or it can have many leaf gaps depending on the type of leaves it arises, right? Jodi eta leaf gap ase tethal tak ami ki boli kom, it will be called as a solenocele. Jodi besi ase, we will be talking about the next diagram. Is this concept clear? Right? Now, what is the question that is asked? The question that is asked is, first, to etu upor koribo pare with one leaf gap, it's called as. Second, in the leaf gap, what is absent? In the leaf gap, xylem and phloem is absent. Obviously, you have to break hoy gol, no? So xylem and phloem jodi absent hoy, can it be a hollow structure? It cannot be hollow, right? There should be certain types of cells. And what is the cell? Parenchyma cells. So the question is, leaf gap or ki na thake, xylem phloem na thake, but instead of that ki thakibo? Parenchyma cells. Gradually, once the leaf starts developing, then both of them will join together, and that joining is called as a leaf trace, right? অকল মোৰ ক্লাছতে মুছিবলৈ টান হয় নে সবৰে হয় বাৰু নে it's only me that finds a problem in rubbing the board always the ink is not good তোমালোকৰ লাগিব ফেন Okay, before writing further, what is the Dictyostele as the name suggests, or as the statement goes? I think we understand. What is a Dictyostele? It is a Siphonostele. What is a Siphonostele? A stele that has a pith in the center is called as a Siphonostele, right? So a Siphonostele with many leaf gap and a Siphonostele with one leaf gap, both of them have two different names, right? If they have many leaf gaps, then it is called as Dictyostele, or it is also called as Polystele. In case of a Polystele or a Dictyostele, যদি এটা stele বহুত leaf gaps develop কৰে তেতিয়াহলে এই গোটেই portion কিনি fragments of divide হৈ যাব না যায়. If we are talking about the structure and you have just one leaf gap, then the structure would be at a particular shape. What is the shape called as? হেতু point লিখিলো ন. এটা circle আছে, circle-ত এটা gap develop কৰিছে. এই স্ট্রাকচারটো কি বুলি কম? Yes or no? Yes. So in the previous discussion that we have done, তাত কবাত horseshoe shaped বুলি লিখি থৈ দিয়া. Solenostele shape to কেনেকুৱা? Horseshoe shaped. Sorry, not solenostele, siphonostele. No, last one, solenostele. Solenostele is horseshoe shaped. And why it became the horseshoe shape from a circular diagram? Because we have seen the development of just one leaf gap, right? Now, if suppose we are talking about a circular diagram like this, and ebar ki hol je bahut leaf gap form korile, ekhinte eta form korile, ekhinte eta form korile, ekhinte eta form korile, তেতিয়াহলে এইবিলাকক কি বুলি কম? Fragments বুলি কম নে নকম? Right? There are many leaf gaps and these fragments are called as meristele. Is the concept clear now? Right? Now this meristele কি হয়? Each fragmented stele, এই গুটেটো আমি কি বুলি কৈছিলো? Stele বুলি কৈছিলে. Each fragmented part is called as a meristele. It is a complete stele. Even this part is called as a complete stele. No doubt the entire stele has broken down into fragments. Each fragment is considered as a complete stele. Now, when is a stele considered as a complete stele? A stele is considered as a complete stele when it has its own xylem, it has its own phloem, it has its own pericycle also. So, no doubt it's a fragmented part, right? Fragments bilakot ki thakibo? Tar xylem thakibo, phloem thakibo, pericycle thakibo. So eta fragment ot gutekhini bostu present hoy ne nohoy. So if it is present, then it would be considered as complete stele. In the leaf gap, xylem and phloem is absent, but in the meristele, xylem and phloem is present. Clear? Another point that is important about pith. Pith is present or absent in Dictyostele. Dictyostele, pith present or absent? Present. Kintu meristele, pith present or absent? Absent. So these 2 points you need to remember, right? Since we are talking about solenostele, siphonostele, so what is a pith thakiboi? So Dictyostele is itself ki hoy. It is nothing but a siphonostele. If it is a siphonostele, then obviously the pith would be present, right? In the main stellar structure, the pith would be present, but in the fragmented parts, the pith would be absent, right? So we'll draw the diagram. দুটামান পয়েন্ট লিখি লওঁ Polycyclic Dictyostele mane a stele in which the merisceles are arranged in 2 rings is called as polycyclic Dictyostele. Eta cycle ase ne duta cycle ase? So meristele report questions ahead. So meristele bostu to ami bhalke porhim. It is a complete stele because it has its own xylem, phloem, pericycle, endodermis, all the tissues. Is peat present in the meristele? No, peat is absent in the meristele. As far as these are concerned, iman important no hoy. Because iman details or question aha nai. Is the diagram understood? ইয়াত আমি cortex লিখা নাই ন? Which part would be called as a cortex? We have the endodermis. Protect to meristily outer layer to ki hoy? Endodermis. Mane outer layer to endodermis ki asile? Cortex. So ultimately a portion kini ki hobo? Cortex. So we are talking about stele, the most primitive. We understood what is the most primitive. It is Protostele. Is Protostele found in case of pteridophytes? Obviously, it is found in case of pteridophytes, but because stellar structure has started developing from pteridophytes itself. But this stellar concept, but this evolution of stele does not stop in the pteridophyte group itself. Apart from the pteridophytes, when we go to gymnosperms and then we go to angiosperms, this stele keeps on evolving. Right. So, if you are talking about a group called as pteridophyte, you have to understand what is the most primitive type of stele that you see in this group and what is the most advanced type of stele that you see in this group. Since we are doing pteridophytes part, so stele bhitorot most advanced stellar structure in case of pteridophytes bully question ahile, what would be the answer? It would be Dictyostele. Now, there are two questions. First question is, what is the most advanced type of stele called as? What is the first? What is the most advanced type of stele called as, and what is the most advanced type of stele found in pteridophytes called as? Understood? Karon kyo evolution jetia hoi thakibo, so both say advanced stele to ami ko dekha pam, so both say advanced plants or dekha pam. So you have to read the question properly. Right now, no doubt we are doing pteridophytes, but since we are talking about this, stele, so ami angiosperms oloke stellar development to kenekwa hoy, we'll just continue the note. We are not going to stop the note here itself because this is all that you need in case of pteridophytes. You know, apart from pteridophytes also, we have certain types of stellar structures seen in case of gymnosperms. Akko angiosperms are to dekha pam. Instead of discussing about stele when we are discussing gymnosperms, when we are discussing angiosperms, it's better since we are doing it, we'll finish this off. Right. So, etia hol pteridophytes oloke number 4 types. Next, we'll go to the 5th type of stele. So, this point is important. Huh? Sorry. So what is Eustele? This is a type of ciliar structure that is found generally in case of certain higher plants like Gymnosperms and Angiosperms, but you have to be precise in which group of Angiosperms it is found in the dicot stem, right? Okay, why did I draw the xylem and phloem like this? First question, something related with anatomy. So if you are talking about the vascular bundle, is it present only in stems or it is present in roots also? It is present in roots also. How will you identify the difference between a stem and a root with respect to the vascular bundle? কেনেকে দেখা পাবা এটা তোমাৰ দুটা সেকশন দিছে ঠিক আছে এডাল স্টেম দিছে এডাল root দিছে right both of them are brown in color so you cannot hardly identify which one is stem and which one is root so from both the section you have cut a TS and you have observed it under the microscope what is the basic difference that you are going to see in both and which will identify which one is a root and which one is a stem phloem to তলত থাকিব phloem to তলত to কত মানে Are you talking about a structure like this? This one? Hodai xylem pithor osor thake, right? It is always xylem that is present. So since we know xylem ki hobo conduct koribo, right? So it is always a xylem that faces towards the pith and phloem away from the pith, right? Next. That was not the answer. Heard something called as radial arrangement. Endarch, exarch, right? Conjoint, collateral, right? Protoxylem, metaxylem karone endarch, exarch asile. Kintu root stems or difference ki asile? Conjoint or radial, right? What is radial? If it has radial arrangement of xylem and phloem, that is a characteristic of K, stem ne roots. No. The most common thing to identify is R and R, no? Radial and roots. ঠিক আছে so radial arrangement কি হয় roots or conjoint car stems or right if you talk about conjoint what we understand something is joined together so etu কি হয় joint etu হয় right so looking at the vascular bundle itself we know that this is the characteristic of a stem precisely ki dicot stem will come to that later but as of now we understand this diagram is of a stem because the vascular bundle is in the form of a conjoint nature right conjoint arrangement of vascular bundle is a characteristic of stem which stem dicot ne monocot later next coming to roots or ki thake radial arrangement what is radial alternate right so if you are talking about like this so you will have xylem occupied next is phloem next again you have xylem again you have phloem xylem phloem alternate ke jodi thake tak ami ki boli kom radial code dekha pam roots so microscope or tolot thakile if you see the vascular bundle arrangement we can identify whether it's a root or a stem right so please remember this one radial is a characteristic of roots R and R both of them are common conjoint is akko conjoint or we will have something other words like open and closed Hekini ami kot pohim anatomy pohim depending on what have you heard open vascular bundle and closed vascular bundle depending on what depending on presence or absence of a particular tissue ki asile open vascular bundle aru closed vascular bundle absence and presence of what cambium right majot cambium layer to ase ne nai jedi ase open jedi nai closed right we'll talk about it during our anatomy class as of now coming to this structure we understood that this is a stem how did you identify that this is a dicot stem stem baru identify korilo karon conjoint hoy no kintu dicot stem boli keneke identify korise eto to monocot stem hobo pare duta word ring aru scattered. Vascular bundles arranged in a ring. You have a proper way in which where you will find the vascular bundles. Vascular bundles scattered. Eneke proper arrangement ringot nathake. Ote tote thakibo. Right? So if you see scattered vascular bundle, that's a characteristic of a monocot. If you see arranged vascular bundle, that's a characteristic of a dicot. So in this case, it is a stem because it is conjoined, it is properly arranged, so obviously it's an example of a dicot stem, right? So what is the type of stellar structure that you see in case of a dicot stem? Eustelly. What is the type of stellar structure that you see in pteridophytes? All the time, highest is Dictyostele, right? Next, apart from all these words, we have come across a word called as medullary rays also. What is medullary rays? Ray-like structures or ray-like cells that develops from kuntu position of thakibo. I have already written between the vascular bundles. So ekhini jedi vascular bundles hoy ei bostu bilak to holo hobo nware, obviously there will be cells. So you will see some ray-like cells and these are called as what? Medullary rays. Who forms the medullary rays? When we will be discussing about secondary growth in plants, precisely which cell forms medullary rays we will be talking about at that time. As of now, what is medullary rays? Certain ray-like structures that is found in between the vascular bundle is called as medullary rays. Second point, it is what is the function of a medullary ray? What is the function of xylem? Conduction of water. Phloem, we understand, right? What is the function of the medullary ray? Medullary ray position kot ase, so son pithor pora ase, right? So what is the function? Kiba to function thakibo. Heard something called as lateral conduction of water. Lateral means sidewise, right? Mainly the water is conducted by the xylem that is present. Sometimes what happens, apart from the xylem, the conduction could be through the sides also. This is what is called as lateral conduction of water. So medullary rays of function conduction of water itself, right? So what happens is sometimes the xylem vessels might get closed. Read something with this heading, transpiration, pull and adhesion cohesion theory. Purisa. Transport in plants. Transpiration, pull and adhesion cohesion theory talks about what? Theory it tells us about what? It tells us about conduction of water. It tells us that xylem conducts water, right? So scientists were doing various experiments to prove who conducts water and what is the process that is involved, right? Conduction keneke hoy. Some scientists said that it is because of root pressure that the water gets transported. Roots or stems or like goise, a upward movement to the hoise. So somewhere of the opinion that it's because of root pressure. What is root pressure? Again, we'll be discussing in transport in plants, not now. So kisumane kose root pressure, kisumane kose osmotic pressure karne, it's rhythmic action of osmotic pressure, etc., etc. But everything was discarded. So bore drawbacks asile, so they were not accepted. What was accepted? It is transpiration, pull and adhesion cohesion theory. What did transpiration, pull and adhesion cohesion theory tells us? It tells us that water is transported from the roots to the different parts of the stem by key adhesion and cohesion property. Adhesion property, adhesion cohesion to Ruzano between like things and unlike things, right? So we'll be talking about that later. Transpiration pull is considered as the best example, best explanation for transportation of water. Eta bostuk jedi tumi consider kora that is the best explanation, that means what? It does not have any criticism. You are placing a theory and that theory someone gives an objection to that, then obviously that will not be accepted. Why is transpiration, pull, adhesion, cohesion theory accepted? Because it is free from exceptions, free from limitations, free from drawbacks, right? But no doubt we say it's free from drawbacks, but in spite of that, ejon scientist eta drawback ulabole chesta korisile. What was the drawback he said is, he said that if xylem is a tube-like structure, it will conduct water. If it conducts water, along with water sometimes it might happen that the air bubbles also goes inside. Obviously, pani khumale to air ahibo. So air jedi ahe, it is a tube-like structure. Tarpra ki loi ase, water absorb korise. Water logot ki ahi goise free? Air ahise. So air jedi humai ki form koribo? Bubbles form koribo. Okoman eta duta bubbles form korile baru problem nai. The water will move like this, right? If suppose the air bubbles enter along with water and the bubbles close the door, then what? It might happen. No, hobo pare noire. You cannot control the placement of the bubbles inside the xylem tube. If it is far away, then obviously the water will go through its own way. But enukao to hobo pare, tetihale pani jabo ne najai? Najabo. But the plant will need water. Then what will happen? At that time, medullary rays by lateral conduction of water hoy. It is not like that all the xylem tubes will be closed at the same time. Eta jodi bondho hoise next kitare ki koribo transport kori thakibo pare. Kintu sometimes it might happen that all gets closed. It might happen. So jodi gutei kita bondho hoi jai, does that mean the plant will not absorb water? No, it will absorb water. Our transport keneke koribo through the medullary. This is what is called as lateral conduction of water. Clear? Ekhini akoi anatomy discussion hoi gol no. This is over, diagram over. Next, likha the last one. This cannot be the most advanced because this is found only in case of dicots. You don't have a proper arrangement, right? You cannot be saying as such that the vascular bundles are arranged in a particular ring. It could be scattered, jote jote pabo pare, right? The next point is, if you are saying this statement, the vascular bundles remain scattered, kot scattered hoi thakibo? Where will it remain scattered? In case of monocots, the vascular bundles remain scattered. Where will it remain scattered? Kot scattered hobo? Scattered kot hobo, ground tissues, no? Suppose if I ask you, where will you find the xylem and phloem? What would be the answer? Below the pericycle. Yes or no? Normal case up till starting from pteridophytes up till dicot stem, where will you find the vascular bundles? You will find them below the pericycle, right? In case of monocots, you cannot be finding them below the pericycle. Jodi below the pericycle a special place hole hoiten, then we would have not used the word scattered. If it is within a particular boundary, then we cannot be using a word called as scattered. Why are we using the word scattered? Because stemot jote tote thakibo pare, right? So jote tote thaka mane, does that mean it is within the pericycle? No. So the next question, pericycle present or absent in case of a monocot? Pericycle jodi present hol heten, tete hal to vascular bundle tar bhitorte thakile heten. Pericycle kon nai karne he scattered hoise. So pericycle absent. Pericycle absent, endodermis is also absent, right? What is the meaning of ground tissue? I think I have explained once before. Ground tissue system? Yes? What is ground tissue system? How many tissue system? Tinta? Epidermal tissue system, ground tissue system and vascular tissue system. So what is ground tissue system? You have to leave behind the epidermis on top and vascular bundles, right? Major khinik ami ki boli kom? Ground tissues, right? In case of a monocot, normally jeti ami ground tissues or kotha kono, you have that epidermis, you have the cortex, you have the endodermis, you have the pericycle. This endodermis, this pericycle, everything includes under what? That entire tissue is called as ground tissue. Epidermis upor thakibo, tar tolot jimanbur tissues ase. Tak ami ki boli kom? Ground tissues or tolot ki ase? Vascular tissues, right? Now, in case of monocot, what I said, ground tissue is present. That indicates ki tahator kono differentiation of layers nai. Epidermis thakibo, epidermis er tolot jiman thakibo, cortex boli ami differentiate koribo noaru, endodermis differentiate koribo noaru. So the entire lot of tissues would be called as the ground tissues. Vascular bundles called present hobo. In the ground tissues keneke present hobo? Scattered. Clear? So the most advanced type of stele in case of question to jeneke mo question, the most advanced type of stele is ectectostele. The most advanced type of stele in case of pteridophytes is dictyostele. Clear? Kiba doubts ase neki swa? So with this we have completed pteridophytes. Next group ami ki kobo laibo? We have to talk about gymnosperms. Yate kiba doubts ase neki? So should we start gymnosperms today? No. Okay. So I think then this is all for today. Next class we will be talking about gymnosperms. And gymnosperms would be the last group of discussion in this chapter, right? Because we are not going to talk anything about angiosperms in this chapter. Angiosperms to ami second year already korilwe. Sexual reproduction already korisu. Morphology also we had parts about this, right? Next class angiosperms and this lesson. Sorry, not angiosperms, gymnosperms. Okay, since you don't have any doubts, I think we can wind up the class. Thank you.